My name is Melline Harper, and I used to believe that 10 years of marriage meant safety, security, trust. But one evening shattered everything I thought I knew. It was our anniversary, 10 years to the day since Ethan and I stood beneath a canopy of garden lights and promised each other forever. To celebrate, he took me to the Crescent, the city's tallest, most luxurious restaurant, the kind of place where you don't just eat, you perform success. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations, and the skyline stretched behind our table like a painted backdrop. I wore a navy silk dress, simple yet elegant, hugging just enough to show I still cared. Ethan looked sharp as always, a crisp black suit, dark tie, and that hint of cedarwood cologne I once found comforting. He smiled as I sat down across from him, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Happy anniversary, Mads," he said, lifting a glass of Cabernet. "To us," I replied, clinking my glass against his. But even then something felt off. It was subtle, a shift in his energy. His voice was smooth, almost rehearsed, but strained beneath it, like a violin string pulled too tight. He glanced at his phone more than at me, his fingers drumming the table as I tried to ask about his day. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had been off for months. Late-night calls he brushed off as client emergencies, weekend meetings that appeared last minute, a growing coldness in his touch. The man who once stayed up all night helping me design my first pitch deck was gone. That night, under the glow of that perfect skyline, I felt lonelier than I ever had in 10 years of marriage. I didn't yet know what he had planned. I didn't know this night would end in a hospital, or that a single glass of wine could change our lives forever. But I knew something wasn't right. And I was right. Looking back, the signs were there. Quiet, easy to dismiss, easy to excuse, but real. Ethan and I had always seemed like a power couple. He ran an investment firm with a shiny office and designer suits. I built my consulting agency from scratch. People admired us, thought we had it all figured out, and for a while, we did. But over the past year, things shifted. Ethan became distracted, less present. It started small, missed calls, vague answers about where he was or why he was late. I told myself he was under pressure. Big clients, tight deadlines. I knew that world too well. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I was living with a stranger. He'd sit at dinner barely touching his food, scrolling through his phone like it held a secret he couldn't share. When I asked about his day, his answers were clipped, guarded. "Same old," he'd say with a shrug. "You know how it is." But I didn't. Not really. The intimacy we once had, late-night conversations, spontaneous weekend getaways, even small rituals like cooking together on Sundays had vanished. In its place was silence, or worse, politeness. Once I asked if something was wrong. He looked up from his laptop, gave a hollow smile, and said, "No, babe, just tired." But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't tired. He was elsewhere, emotionally gone. A few weeks before our anniversary, I found a second phone in his gym bag. It wasn't locked, but when I opened it, it was wiped clean, no contacts, no messages, nothing but a blank home screen. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe he was separating work and personal life. Maybe it wasn't even his. But my gut said otherwise. That night, I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. Two people under the same roof, living two different stories. And still, I didn't leave. I didn't ask the hard questions. I wanted to believe in us, that this was just a rough patch. But sometimes, what we call a rough patch is really just the beginning of an ending. I excused myself halfway through the meal, claiming I needed to freshen up. In truth, I just needed space. The tension at the table was unbearable, like sitting across from a mask you once loved. The hallway outside the dining room was quiet, dimly lit, polished marble floors gleaming under a soft jazz tune overhead. I leaned against the wall for a moment, closing my eyes. My heart was racing, and I didn't even know why. That's when I heard someone say my name. Not ma'am or excuse me, but my actual name. "Mrs. Harper." I turned. It was the waitress who had been serving us all evening. She looked barely 20, her dark hair braided and tied back neatly. Her name tag read Sarah. But now, her expression was different, tense, serious. She glanced nervously around before stepping closer. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she whispered, "but I need to tell you something." I blinked. "What is it?" Her voice dropped even lower. "I saw your husband put something in your wine." Everything inside me froze. She rushed to explain. "When you got up to go to the restroom, I was clearing a table nearby. I saw him pull something from his coat pocket and drop it into your glass. It dissolved fast. I don't know what it was, but the way he did it, it didn't feel right." I just stared at her. Surely she was mistaken. "Ethan, he might be distant, even cold lately, but poison? You're sure?" I asked. "I'm sure," she said, eyes wide. "I've seen him here before. He always acts so careful. Calculated. I wouldn't say anything if I wasn't absolutely certain." The hallway seemed to shrink around me. My breath caught in my chest. Sarah glanced toward the restroom door. "I have to get back before they notice I'm gone." "I'm sorry." If it were me, I'd want someone to tell me." And just like that, she slipped away. I stood frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the sink, the other clutching my bag like it was the only solid thing left in the world. I wanted to believe she was wrong, that she had misunderstood, that Ethan had done something innocent, maybe stirred sugar into my wine. But deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong. Suddenly, the man I had spent 10 years beside wasn't just a stranger. He might be something far worse. I stared at the woman in the navy dress in the mirror. Her face looked familiar, but something had changed. Her eyes weren't just tired. They were wide with something sharper. Fear, yes, but also clarity. I had a choice to make. If Sarah was wrong, I'd look paranoid. But if she was right, I couldn't ignore it. I took a deep breath, smoothed the creases in my dress, and stepped back into the hallway. The hum of the dining room returned like background noise I could no longer pretend was beautiful. Everything felt louder now. Every laugh, every clink of glass, every flicker of candlelight. At the table, Ethan barely looked up from his phone. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping his phone face down. "Yeah," I said lightly. "Just needed a moment." He smiled. "You sure? You look pale. Headache?" "Nothing serious," I replied, sliding into my seat. My eyes drifted to the 2 glasses of Cabernet still on the table. Mine was on the right where I had left it, his untouched one on the left. Somewhere inside one of them, a lie waited. I made my move casually, hiding it behind a stretch and a quiet laugh. I reached for my glass, then paused. "This wine's too good to waste," I joked, and in a single smooth motion, slid his glass toward me and nudged mine to his side. He didn't notice, eyes glued to his phone, fingers tapping a message. I took a small sip. Rich, slightly dry as always, but heavy on my tongue, bitterness blending with dread. "To 10 more years," I said, locking eyes with him. He looked up, surprised for a moment, then gave a thin smile and raised his glass. He echoed, "To 10 more," and drank deeply. I watched his throat move, watched the wine vanish while my own glass, his really, remained half full. A strange quiet settled between us. I kept smiling even as every part of me screamed. Had I just made a huge mistake? Tested something that didn't exist? Or had I just put Ethan on a collision course with his own plan? I didn't know. But I did know this. I had stopped being passive. I was no longer the woman waiting to be acted upon. I was the one watching, listening. And if he had tried to hurt me, I had just turned his plan on its head. At first, nothing happened. Ethan leaned back in his chair, casually wiping his mouth with a napkin. Too relaxed. The kind of ease that doesn't come from comfort but from believing he's in control. I twirled my fork, forcing calm, though my fingers trembled just enough to hide under the table. I watched him carefully. Every blink, every breath, every nervous glance at his watch. My voice light, I asked, "How's that big deal going? The one that's been keeping you up every night?" His eyes narrowed just slightly. "It's complicated," he said, tone clipped. "Big stakes, high risk. You know how it is." I nodded slowly. Sure, but you've always liked the high-stakes games, haven't you? He didn't respond. He reached for his water, took a small sip, then glanced at my his wine glass, and paused. You're not drinking much, he said casually. Saving it, I replied, smiling sweetly. This one deserves to be savored. His fingers drummed on the table, faster, then slower, then stopped altogether. A few seconds passed. Then he coughed. Dry. Quick. Again. And again. My heart thudded in my chest as he brought his hand to his forehead. You okay? I asked, voice steady despite the storm inside me. Yeah, he muttered. Just tired. But he didn't look tired. His face had lost color, a thin sheen of sweat at his hairline. His eyes blinked rapidly, unfocused. His hand trembled as he reached for his wine. My wine, but missed. The glass tipped, spilling across the table like dark blood on white linen. Ethan, I stood quickly, the chair legs screeching. He groaned, slumping forward, his body sagging as if the strings had been cut. Someone gasped behind me. A waiter dropped a tray. The dining room quieted, all eyes on us. Call 911, I shouted. Sarah appeared out of nowhere, pale as chalk. She stared at Ethan, then at me. The man slumped at the table. My husband of 10 years wasn't just unwell. He was unraveling. And I knew without a doubt that the glass he had meant for me had betrayed him instead. His plan had failed, and I had survived. The emergency room was cold, not in temperature, but in spirit, a stillness that made time feel suspended. I sat alone in a plastic chair, my navy silk dress wrinkled and stained with Cabernet, the same wine that almost ended my life. Everything felt distant. The buzz of fluorescent lights, the hum of a vending machine, a local news anchor murmuring from a wall-mounted TV no one watched. I hadn't called anyone. Who would I call? My parents were retired in Florida. My coworkers thought I lived a picture-perfect life. I wasn't ready to explain that my husband might have tried to poison me. My hands trembled in my lap. I kept replaying the scene. The way he'd looked at my glass, the way his body folded in on itself, the way I had stood there, watching. A door opened. A doctor in a white coat stepped into the waiting area, scanning the room. Mrs. Harper? She asked. I stood, knees slightly buckling. I'm Dr. Patel, she said, guiding me to a quieter corner. Your husband is stable but under sedation. He ingested a high dose of a controlled sedative, diazepam, not the over-the-counter kind. He had a concentrated, possibly lethal dose if left untreated. My mouth went dry. I swallowed hard. I think that was meant for me, I said quietly. Her brows lifted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. A waitress warned me. She saw him put something in your drink, so you swapped glasses? Dr. Patel nodded slowly, voice calm. That would explain it. The dosage in his system was far beyond safe. He's lucky you acted when you did. I looked away, throat tightening. I didn't even want to believe it. She set her clipboard against her chest. We'll need to involve the police. This isn't just a medical emergency. It's a legal matter now. You did the right thing. The right thing? I felt like I was drifting between two realities. One where my husband was my partner, my protector, and one where he had quietly planned to eliminate me. All for what? Money? Control? I sat back down, not to wait, but to gather myself. The man I thought I knew was behind a hospital curtain, sedated, alive. But the truth between us was exposed, and nothing could cover it again. The truth came faster than I expected. 2 days later, a call from one of Ethan's former clients, a woman named Lacey, rattled me. She had once gushed about how Ethan saved her portfolio. Her voice trembled. I didn't know who else to tell, she said. But I think Ethan's firm is in serious trouble. That was an understatement. Within a week, everything unraveled, quietly at first, then publicly. Ethan's investment company, once praised in business magazines, was collapsing. Months of bad trades, failed investments, and increasingly risky deals had caught up with him. Creditors circled. Lawsuits were already being drafted. I found documents hidden in a storage bin in our home office, papers he clearly hoped I'd never see. Letters from banks, warnings from the SEC, even an unsigned power of attorney that would have transferred all my company assets to his name if I had been incapacitated. That's what he wanted. Not necessarily my death, but my silence, my disappearance. He needed control, and he was desperate enough to do the unthinkable to get it. He must have thought that if I couldn't speak, if I couldn't act, he could step in. As my husband, he would have claimed authority, access, ownership. What broke me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the calculated patience, the way he smiled at me over dinner, touched my hand, called me Mads, acted like nothing was wrong. He was drowning, and he was ready to drag me under just to keep himself afloat. But I didn't drown. I didn't sip that wine. And now, the man who once promised to build a future with me was facing charges instead of champagne, all because I listened to a whisper and trusted my gut over a familiar smile. In the days that followed, I moved through life like a shadow. The media caught wind of a story before I was ready. Headlines hinted at scandal. Investment star hospitalized after wine incident. My name was always there, paired with his. But no one knew the full story, not yet. Some friends reached out, confused. Others disappeared completely, as if discomfort were contagious. I didn't blame them. Who wants to believe a man like Ethan, charming, respected, always the one raising a toast, could be capable of such things? But I wasn't interested in saving face. I was interested in the truth. When the detectives called, I didn't hesitate. I told them everything, from Sarah's warning to the glass switch, from the hidden documents to the storage bin full of secrets. I handed it all over, emails, notes, even my own journals. Ethan was charged with attempted poisoning and other crimes related to financial fraud. His lawyer tried to spin it a misunderstanding, he said. Pressure. Mental instability. But I had lived beside that mind for 10 years. I knew the difference between instability and strategy. I didn't attend the first court hearing. I stayed home, sitting by the window in silence, drinking tea from a mug Ethan never liked. The sky outside was gray but honest. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and started writing. Not about revenge, not about anger, but about survival. About how sometimes the most dangerous place for a woman isn't a dark alley, but the familiar space across the table from the man who says he loves her. And about how listening to your instincts, no matter how soft the whisper, isn't just brave, it can save your life. I don't know exactly when it happened, when I stopped seeing myself as a victim and started recognizing my strength. Maybe it was the moment I swapped those glasses. Maybe it was the second I chose to believe the frightened voice of a stranger over the calm smile of my husband. Or maybe it was afterward, standing in front of a mirror and seeing a woman I finally respected. The months that followed weren't easy. Healing rarely is. I went to therapy. I distanced myself from people clinging to the illusion of our marriage. I let myself grieve, not just the relationship, but the years I spent shrinking so someone else could shine. And then I began to speak. Small at first, a women's leadership conference, a podcast, a panel at a nonprofit helping women recognize coercion and financial manipulation in relationships. I didn't tell my story for attention. I told it because silence almost killed me. Today, I'm not defined by what happened that night at the Crescent. I'm defined by what I did after. I rebuilt. I returned to my company stronger than before. I hired Sarah, the young waitress who warned me, as my executive assistant. She's studying business now, and I'm proud to mentor her. People still ask if I ever loved Ethan. The truth is yes, I did, deeply. But love isn't a reason to sacrifice your safety, and it's no excuse for betrayal. No one, no matter how familiar, has the right to make you doubt your reality. If you're watching this and my story resonates with you even a little, hear this. Trust yourself. Listen to your instincts. Don't wait for a crash to confirm what your gut already knows. And if you've ever escaped something that once felt unescapable, take a moment to honor your survival. This is Meline's story, but maybe it's yours too. If this touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and share, and subscribe to The Art of Revenge, where true stories of strength, clarity, and quiet triumph are brought to light. Your voice matters, and your truth is never too small to be heard.